So for the first time in the history of the sport, the Motocross of Nations had a new format. 24 countries, 3 rider teams, 2 riders ride each moto. That meant for the first moto, as Johnny lined up, I'm watching this from the top of a motorhome. What we had decided to do, since we had been lucky enough to draw number 1, actually there's a great story behind that. We actually drew number 3. They needed to do a redraw, and we drew number 1. So I think Europe just decided, okay, well, it's just going to be that kind of a day for the Americans. And the difference in this event is that you're not allowed to go out there with your mechanics. So you go out there and you have to get everything organized yourself and organize a 2-row start. And you can see that Johnny's lined up just a little bit to the side to give Rick Johnson an opening to the inside of the more powerful 250. Watch this start Johnny gets on his 125 against 48 of the best in the world. And from the top of the motorhome, I couldn't see exactly what was going on, but as soon as they made this little right-left and headed up the hill, I saw the unmistakable helmets, the blue with white stripes, Rick in second and Johnny in fourth. I could not believe what I was seeing. Rick from the back row into second, and Johnny in the top 5. Johnny picked off a guy on the way down the elevator shaft, we call it, and as they headed out of sight, Johnny was all over the local favorite, Michele Rinaldi, and Rick had taken over the lead. And as they popped back into view, Rick was starting to stretch it out, and Johnny had moved past Rinaldi, which explained all the noise I was hearing. The crowd that I thought was loud on Saturday just went into overdrive during the race, especially with their own running at the front of the pack. And for Rick, this was just another routine day, back out front, leading it. Got his signal in the first turn, but I can tell you, as Rick got that signal and realized what place Johnny is, probably he was even surprised. Listen to that 125. No 125s in sight. Dropping down that, nicknamed the elevator shaft. Every lap got your attention because you had to come out of the corner and upshift one more gear because the free fall would actually carry so much more speed when you landed, you almost went over the handlebars. Johnny made his pass into second, pulls a tear off, and goes on after Rick. Now, I think what was happening for Rick right here is he's going, all right, I can hear Johnny back there, but we're 1-2. We'll just set a comfortable pace, pull away, and do what we need to do. But like I said, Johnny told me the night before, he goes, you know what, Dave? I'm not going to let off. So I think while Rick was trying to set a comfortable pace, he was fastest on Saturday. Johnny was all over him, but Rick was like, come on. You know, this is fast enough. That Johnny could ride a 125, perhaps the best in the world to have ever ridden one. Early in the race, already opened up a huge lead over Rinaldi. That's John Vanderberg. That's a Cagiva. I don't even know if they make them anymore. The guy in the yellow there is Craig Dack from Australia. He's the trainer now for Michael Byrne. So as you can see, Rick, who had been dominating the entire 86 season, even against Johnny, me, Jeff Ward, Lachine, all on 250s, it's even more amazing to realize that Rick's putting in another one of his fine rides and Johnny is that close on a 125. And while this was going on, it's a weird thing to be part of this, but at the same time going, okay, should I start getting dressed and get ready for my moto, or should I watch these guys a little longer? It was the most awkward situation I've ever been in the Motocross of Nations. The year before, they decided to combine the Motocross of Nations, which was always 2 weekends. 1 week in one country on 120 or 250s, the next weekend in another country on 500s, but it was way too much of a task to bring everyone to a foreign country and 2 sets of bikes. Very expensive. So they decided, well, let's combine it and run it all on one day. Now, the year before in 85, it was 63 riders on the gate. Every rider from every country rode at the same time, and it was way too crowded. So this was the brand new format they're actually still using today. And again, you can see Johnny just all over Rick. And as they came into this section right here next to the pits, this is where I was able to get a good look. Big tabletop jump right there, but what got difficult to jump it was the glare going up the hill, and it got rough. Johnny's master at squeezing every ounce out of that 125, keeping it in a perfect power band all the time. You know what? At 20 years ago, 125s were pretty slow. It took a lot of effort to make that bike sing and pop, only the way Johnny and Jeff Ward and Mark Barnett could do. It was such a privilege being on a team with these guys, and you know, realizing from what Johnny told me the night before that this was the last time Johnny was going to ride a Honda, last time we were going to be teammates. All those years riding at the Honda track, following Johnny around on all the new trails he made, I was going through a lot that day. I think he was too, knowing that all that was going to come to an end, because having a riding partner like Johnny, I never felt like I was as able to find a stylish way through a technical section as he was, and we made each other better. When Rick joined Honda, he brought intensity, which was something that we were lacking. We had gotten comfortable with our programs and were starting to get beat. Rick came in there and, just like Roger DeCoster and Dave Arnold had predicted, lifted the pace, forced us to ride a little bit harder, and actually put all that training we used to do to use. And we became the top 3 riders in the country. Now, that's one thing to be the best in your country, but now we're up in front of the world to prove that. To prove that we're not only the best of our country, but the best, period. And during Saturday practice, that wasn't necessarily the case. The Europeans are extremely fast in practice, and I know Rick went out quite a few times after Joe Bay or Thorpe or one of the guys on the big 500s would go out and post a fast lap. He kept going back out and trying to beat it and send a message saying, hey, we're not going to settle for second best anywhere. And that was good. It kept our focus high. And by the time the gate dropped and things had settled down a little bit, Johnny and Rick were so far in front that all the pressure was up to me now to go back out against 3 500 world champions and do the same thing. So with Moto 1 in the books, USA was perfect. First and second in the Moto, first in each class. Now at the Motocross of the Nations, each Moto has its own podium celebration. And as Rick climbs on the top step for the win, Michele Rinaldi pleases the Italian fans with his podium finish, and you can see the concentration on Johnny's face, because he knows he's going up against the 500s. And with their performance, the pressure had been building on me the whole entire Moto. So with that, let's kick it up a notch to the original voice of motocross, Larry Myers.
The second moto of the 1986 Motocross of the Nations will pit the powerful 500s against the 125s that only 1 hour earlier had raced the 250s. David Bailey, the U.S. 1986 500 champion, appeared confident, but he was on the spot. To save face, he needs a performance to match the ones turned in by O'Mara and Johnson. On O'Mara's face, there was only concentration. He had to be thinking, what chance do I have on a 125 against the 500s? Although the O-Show will be scored only against the 125s, his intentions were clear. It was time to race, and the American team was ready.
Whoa, okay, hold on. Here's what really happened. Because of the massive crowds, Chris Haynes couldn't get Johnny's bike into the impound in time, so the officials had just told Johnny, you cannot race this moto. Okay, back to Larry.
David Bailey was the first rider into the start area. In this moto, Bailey would take the first position on the gate. With 2 first-place scores turned in moto number 1, the American team would not risk the possibility of the powerful 500 running into the 125 off the line. Next to Bailey, rider number 7 is Heinz Kinnegatter from Austria. Lining up third, number 20, is Peter Kovar from the Czech team. Kovar is on a 125. In the number 4 gate position is Serwin Krzysztof from Poland, rider number 60. Krzysztof is on a 500 Kawasaki. Rider number 68 is Andre Bartolini, a 125 Suzuki rider from San Marino. Number 42 is two-time and reigning World 500cc champion David Thorpe from England. As the rest of the field began filing in, David Bailey, perhaps feeling the pressure of this prestigious event, got off his machine and made a final check. Roger DeCoster, the U.S. team manager, watched Bailey with a careful eye. He had been in this situation many times riding for Belgium. Johnny O'Mara, rider number 3, the 125 entry from the U.S., took his position behind Bailey. For O'Mara, the start will be treacherous and critical. By the time he reaches the first corner, he'll be surrounded by 500s. But the O-Show can't afford to back off. Passing will be difficult. He can't afford to be beaten by other 125s off the line. The start of moto number 2 is less than a minute away. Bailey makes a final adjustment to his goggles. In the field are no less than 5 world champions. David Thorpe from England, Håkan Karlqvist from Sweden, Heinz Kinnegatter, Austria, George Jobé from Belgium. And riding a 125, Eric Gavors, also from Belgium. The riders are tense. The engines are being revved. The gate is about to be dropped for moto number 2. One rider lunges ahead. He catches himself, backs up. There goes the gate, and moto number 2 is underway. David Bailey from the inside takes the hole shot. He leads the pack through corner number 1. O'Mara is stuck in the middle of the pack. The 125 was not strong enough to pull with the 500s, and O'Mara is paying the price. Bailey, meanwhile, at the head of the pack, will take every advantage that he possibly can of the open track to put ground between himself and the rest of the field. In his career, Bailey has twice been named the Grand National Champion of motocross. He's won a pair of Supercross titles. In 1983, he was the 250 National Champion. In 500 competition, Bailey has a pair of titles, one in '84 and another this year, 1986. Bailey is also the veteran of this team when it comes to Motocross Donations competition. This is the 5th straight year he's been a member of the U.S. team. His first year, 1982, he was teamed with Danny Magoo Chandler, Jim Gibson, and Johnny O'Mara. At the Trophy Donations, the race for the 250s, Bailey turned in moto performances of 8th and 6th as the USA beat Belgium 23-34. The following weekend, it was Motocross Donations for the 500cc bikes. Bailey turned in performances of 4th and 2nd as the USA beat Belgium 24-40. That was a big year, 1982, for U.S. motocross. Brad Lackey turned out to be the 500cc world champion, Dan Laporte the 250cc world champion, and of course the U.S. team winning both the motocross and trophy donations. In 1983, Bailey was teamed with Brock Glover, Jeff Ward, and Mark Barnett, and the U.S. team made it 3 in a row. At the trophy donations, Bailey turned in moto finishes of 4th and 1st as the USA again beat Belgium 15-32. On the 500cc machines at motocross donations, Bailey turned in moto finishes of 7th in moto number 1 and 5th in moto number 2. Again, it was the USA on top of Belgium 18-52. Here at Maggiora, Italy, Bailey is turning in another fine motocross donations performance. The Team Honda rider from Axton, Virginia took the opening hole shot and has not looked back. He's opened a huge lead over the rest of the field, a field that includes 5 world champions. Johnny O'Mara, meanwhile, is continuing to work his way through the pack, but O'Mara has his work cut out for him. In front of him, David Bailey, of course, in the lead, running in the number 2 position, rider number 42, David Thorpe from England. Gert-Jan van Doren, the Dutch rider, is currently holding down the number 3 position, with George Jobé running 4th. In 5th, it's the Austrian Heinz Kinnegartner, then Håkan Karlqvist, and Johnny O'Mara has worked to the number 7 position. The O-Show in corner number 1 was in the middle of the pack. By the time the first lap was in the books, he had moved all the way to 11th. On the second lap, he was 9th. On the third lap, he'd moved to 8th. And now moving into that number 7 position, and O'Mara is still closing. The O-Show is turning in one of the finest rides of his career. He's doing it on a 125, and he's doing it against the best motocrossers in the world. David Bailey, meanwhile, continues to lead and continues to pull away from the rest of the field. The Americans are simply devastating the competition. With 3 riders to a team and each rider riding twice, there are 6 possible scores for each team at Motocross Donations. But only the top 4 scores, the best 4 scores turned in by a team, will count toward team championship points. If the Americans are able to hold their positions in moto number 2, David Bailey will win the 500 class. Johnny O'Mara will again win the 125 class. That will give the Americans 4 first places, and they will wrap up Motocross Donations with 1 moto remaining. It's an unbelievable performance by the unbelievable American team. And look at this. There's Thorpe in 2nd, Jobé in 3rd, and Johnny O'Mara is right on the rear wheel of Jobé. O'Mara has moved to the number 4 position. Directly in front of him, 2 world champions. David Bailey is long gone. He's way out in front, and look at Bailey crest that hill. In his 5th year as a member of the U.S. team, Bailey has overpowered the field. His performance, though, is being overshadowed by O'Mara on the 125. Thorpe should crest the hill any second, and there he is, rider number 42 from England, Dave Thorpe. There's Jobé, rider number 10 on a Kawasaki, and right behind him is the O-Show. The weight and power differences between 500s and 125s dictate a completely different style of riding. The 500s go into the corner much slower. They come out much harder. The 125s, on the other hand, need to go through the corners with engines revving in order to come out at any kind of speed at all. But despite the 500 slowing him up, O'Mara has been able to stay with the 500s in front of him. He's kept the pressure on George Jobé from Belgium. Here's Thorpe, rider number 42, up over the top of the hill, and Jobé goes down. O'Mara has had the pressure on Jobé, and it's paid off as the Osho moves into the number 3 position. David Bailey, meanwhile, is putting on a motocross clinic for the spectators. Bailey's performance is not surprising. The American riders have long been acknowledged as the best motocross riders in the world. From the middle of the pack on the opening lap, O'Mara caught the world champion George Jobé, who was then running in the number 3 position. He put the pressure on and kept it on. Jobé finally fell, and O'Mara went by. He has now caught Thorpe, and O'Mara, with an inside line, driving up one of those hills he was talking about, has taken the measure of the world champion 500cc rider, David Thorpe from England. And O'Mara has moved into the number 2 position. An incredible ride for the Osho on a 125. David Bailey in the number 1 position has to have heard the tremendous roar of the crowd as O'Mara made that pass. Bailey has got to be wondering what is going on behind him. According to his pit board, he has, with just a couple of laps to go, at least a 20-second lead. Now Bailey has slowed the pace considerably the last few laps, but he has to wonder now, should he pick it up? Is someone making a charge that might threaten that number 1 position? Someone indeed is doing just that. It's Johnny O'Mara. The Osho, with a clear track in front of him, has started to pull away from Thorpe. Bailey is on the last lap of the second moto of the 1986 Motocross des Nations, an event that so far has seen complete, total American dominance. O'Mara won the 125 in moto number 1. Johnson won the 250. In moto number 2, O'Mara will duplicate his feat, and David Bailey wins the 500s. With one moto remaining and a score of 4 points, 1 point for each of the class wins, the American team will have clinched the Motocross des Nations. Here's Bailey across the finish line. He takes the checkered flag, and there's O'Mara. What a ride put in by the Osho! That has to have been the best ride of O'Mara's career. For O'Mara, the day is over. 2 moto rides, 2 125 class wins, and 2 incredible second-place overall finishes. O'Mara and Bailey are both now inside the paddock area, and Bailey will soon find out what that incredible roar was he heard behind him. There's DeCoster talking to Bailey, a big smile on his face. He's congratulating Bailey and telling him that the Americans have clinched the 1986 Motocross des Nations. Now DeCoster looking at the other end of the paddock for Johnny O'Mara. Bailey heads toward the victory rostrum to receive the applause from the thousands of Italian fans. Now Bailey stopped. He's looking behind him for the Osho. The 2 of them have clinched the championship, and the 2 of them will take that walk to the victory stand together.
And I'll never forget that walk either. Watch Johnny right here lean over and just hang on me. He was spent, used everything he had, and his visor was cracked right down the middle from eating roost off of 3 500s, including the world champion Dave Thorpe right there to my left, who had just wrapped up the championship the week before and then got beat by 125. So I don't know if he was able to savor much more after that, but getting to experience what Rick did in the first moto, looking at Dave like, what do I do with all this stuff? He goes, open it. So as the champagne was flying, Johnny's job was done. He had done what he said he was going to do. He never let off, beat the 500 world champion, 2 former 500 world champions. And his day was done. Mine and Rick's battle for the final moto was about to begin. That was an accident. I meant to just spray him a little bit, accidentally in his eyes, but it's kind of how his day went. So as Rick took the gate for the final moto, championship already in hand, it was kind of an awkward feeling. I only rode 1 moto. We've already won the championship again, so this was sort of a glory run and a little bit of bragging rights as well. I have to admit, 20 years later, that on this particular performance at the des Nations, my 5th year, I was feeling the most selfish. I really felt good on the track, good on the bike, and I wanted to win this moto and beat Rick. He had gotten the better of me all year, and usually you're supposed to function as a team, but for this moto, since it didn't matter, I wanted to win it. And I knew it would be a challenge coming from the second row. Thorpe was obviously motivated, save face after getting beat by a 125, as was George Jobay and Håkan Karlqvist. But we had the inside off the start, a good plan off the gate. It's just a matter of executing it. One last little burnout to make sure we're not starting on fresh grass, since we were not able to practice this start at all before the race. So it's really important to get a good rut. You see that Rick is actually lined up outside of his rut. His throttle grip is almost touching Heinz Kinnegatter there. I believe that's who that is on his right. So he has actually sacrificed his comfort just to make a little bit more room for me. And watch how good it works. Great start for us on the inside, avoiding all this mess. Number 72 right there was Håkan Karlqvist, who was already mad at himself for allowing a 125 to beat him in the second moto. Adding more problems to his day. As I dropped back down into this valley behind Thorpe, it occurred to me from the year before, where he owned the Motocross of Nations and me, that I could not let this guy get comfortable. I needed to keep the pressure on and make him worry more about me. Already making mistakes. I allowed Gert Jan Van Doorn to get past, but saw a good cushion there on the outside. Was able to sneak back by and continue to apply that pressure on Thorpe. As 20 years have gone by, I can be honest and tell you that this last moto, even though it didn't matter, I really wanted to win the moto, and I really wanted to beat Rick. He'd been beating me all year long, and feeling a little selfish. I wanted to get past Thorpe and check out. So the best way to do that is, on a tight track, is to keep the pressure on. You can see I'm all over him. And when you're that close, you know, the rider in front, he can't even think about what he's doing. He's so worried about you. And I know how that is for my, if I have somebody following me, I feel that way. So I knew that if I could keep the pressure on, I could force him into a mistake and get by clean. Quick look over my shoulder to see that Rick Johnson's right there where I expected him to be. So even though we've already wrapped it up, it's in the back of my mind that if Rick and I can go 1-2 in this moto, that would be flawless. Never been done. And it's looking like a real possibility. Still not really able to find a way around Thorpe without using some force. And he's the kind of rider that, he's a nice man. And, somebody that demands the kind of respect. You don't want to go in there and run over his foot and knock him out of the way. He's the kind of guy you want to pass cleanly, because you just know that's how he would pass you. And as Rick started to catch us, that selfish state I talked about, that started to come back into play, and I got aggressive in the back, made my way around Dave, and began to check out. I'll tell you this, following a 500 for a couple laps hurts. So I knew what Rick was feeling back there. Once in the clear and still pretty sharp from the moto before, I had the advantage over Rick. Both Thorpe and I did, of knowing exactly how the track had developed and where it was rough, what berms had gotten too deep, and how to take the best line and not take 2 or 3 laps wasting time to get adjusted. Watch Rick right here do the same exact thing I did to Thorpe. So he's back there watching my lines and Thorpe's, getting it all figured out and just setting Dave up. As I would reflect in preparation for this race on the year before in Germany, that hurt. Dave Thorpe just owned it. He owned me, and I didn't want to go through that again. And knowing that we were going to be coming to Europe on production bikes versus Europe still riding the works bikes, I knew that I was going to have every edge possible. So, in fact, the entire team, I think, felt that, and we got to Europe early. Got to ride on 2 different tracks in preparation for the race, and I'd never felt more ready. And so far, it was showing. Rick still trying to figure out a way around Thorpe, but you can see every time he heads up a hill like this, any momentum that he could build on that 500 through the corner was lost up the hill. So I think somewhere in the back of Rick's mind, though, he's thinking, okay, if Johnny could beat this guy at 125, I'd better be able to beat him on my 250. So while I continue to inch away a little bit, stealing a glance over my shoulder every once in a while to see how Rick was doing, I was feeling pretty comfortable. It's amazing that I had so many people coming up to me after this race going, man, you were on fire, I've never seen you ride so well. And it's funny, when things are clicking, they're just clicking. I never really felt like I was putting that much effort into it. George Jobet right there, not having his best day. Outside the top 10, a crash in Moto 2. It's usually Belgium that we were always worried about. They were so strong in years before, but this particular year it was Great Britain led by Dave Thorpe and Finland and Italy in a duel for the final spot on the podium. But speaking of the duel, Rick Johnson started putting the pressure on Thorpe, and he'd been setting him up on this drop-off, Rick's favorite part of the whole racetrack. Out jumps him and just guns it down the inside. Sorry my dad missed the pass, but Rick told me later, he said he went in so hot, he rode the front wheel for probably 20 or 30 feet just so he could avoid the contact to Dave, because Dave's just not the kind of guy you want to run into. He wouldn't do it to you, and you want to pass him clean. So once Rick had made that pass, I heard the crowd going crazy behind me, but I wasn't totally sure. I didn't know if someone fell or what exactly had happened, and that's about ready to get confirmed for me as I come down this straightaway into the first corner where our signal area was, and they're all jumping up and down, and screaming and yelling, and they got perfect on the board. That just felt even better. As I was trying to lay up just a little bit and allow Rick, you can see him back there, to catch up so we could ride across the finish line together, it was just one of those days where even when I slowed down a little bit, I still was finding lines and things working out for me that had me on the same lap times as when I was pushing. So I think Rick was like, come on, Dave. Remember we talked about going across the line together? Are you going to wait? So this last few laps out here was special because I realized what we had done. I knew we were part of something where it was going to be talked about for years to come. And just enjoying riding that big 500 and in front of the fans on an awesome track, beautiful day. You know, a lot of things go through your mind. Since we'd already wrapped up the championship, I'm not having the usual things that go through your mind, like I hope I don't break a rear wheel or this thing seizes. We've already wrapped it up. Now it's just, where's Rick? Let's go across the line together. And things like making a speech that night at the awards dinner and getting married in 1 week. Wishing my wife could be here to see this. You know, it's crazy. From a fan's standpoint, they're looking at the rider thinking, man, look how fast these guys are, and negotiating this track, which was rough, and the glare from the sun, the last part of the day, we're tired. And you'd think that it would take all your concentration, but here I am worried about what we're going to eat later and all kinds of things like that. It's amazing what runs through your mind when you have that much time to think. It's better, actually, when you have pressure and you can focus. Sometimes when you let up is when you make a mistake, but this wasn't the day for mistakes. Everybody was on. And you can see now I'm just looking for Rick. Right when he started to get close to me, he made a mistake and lost some time, so I had to slow down even more. But fortunately, we had that luxury. Dropping back down into the valley over the jump that Rick appropriately named the elevator shaft. So rough getting into that corner. That's where he made the pass on Thorpe down the inside. While Thorpe had to negotiate that last big kicker going into the rut, Rick was able to just keep it pinned down the inside. It's a special feeling winning the Motocross of Nations. You know, you see American flags all the time. They don't do that much for you, but when you're winning a race like this, you're overseas, you see American flag waving in the crowd, and it really does give you energy, makes you feel good, makes you feel patriotic, and like you've just done something special. Sure miss the sound of the 500s. But that bike basically right there is putting out about the same horsepower as what the riders are riding now on their 450s. Even though the 500 class is extinct, we just about have another one now in the 450 class. And prior to this race, you know, you'd think a tight track wouldn't be so good for a 500, but, you know, like I said, this was one of those days where everything went perfect, and part of that was our preparation that it went well. And for me, I had so much rain before I left the U.S. that I was actually able to make a track in the grass. It had a lot of tight corners and ruts, so much like this track, that what I thought was really hurting my preparation before I left home actually helped me. Still waiting for Rick to get a little closer. Laps winding down. Just wishing that I could keep riding this moto and keep this feeling forever. It's one of those times where you see the white flag, you're like, man, already? love to have put in a few more laps out here because the fans, yes, first of all, it's the biggest crowd I'd ever seen. And they're hanging over the fences, and whether they're from the U.S. and supporting the U.S. or not, they let you know they appreciate what's going on out there. Still waiting for Rick. It was one of those motos where, like I said, I couldn't seem to make any mistakes. And Rick was back there going, "Come on, Dave. Wait. We talked about this." Still pushing hard and extending our lead over the rest of the world. So we had all the time in the world to line up a final lap, little celebration. It was also very clear in my mind as Rinaldi makes another pass. It was very clear in my mind that this was the last time I would ever race with O'Mara as my teammate. And as much time as we had spent together at the Honda track and training, that was going to end, and now it was going to be me and Rick left at Honda. And so I figured what better way to transition to that by right now. Let's together show the world we're the best, we'll be back, and that we appreciate each other's teamwork. Doesn't get any better than that. I've never seen so many people go across the finish line in my life. Those riders were like, "What should we do? Should we go? Should we stop?" Because there was people all over the entire racetrack. They couldn't even continue if they wanted. Yeah, I guess you can have those. Such a buzz in the air after we had won this. And you want to go back and share it with your mechanics, with Roger, with Dave Arnold, with Tour, the people that had helped us function over there as comfortably as possible. Difficult to put into words what it feels like to win the biggest race in the world with a perfect score. Wish I knew where that thing was. It's my mechanic there, Cliff White, as usual, doing a perfect job with the bike. Letting my dad know how happy I am. Making my way to the podium where Johnny joined us, and for the 5th year in a row, we came out on top. Now, even though it seemed like we had a pretty easy day, I was still spent. But it was a lot better than the previous 4 years that I'd been on the team, where it was so much closer. It came down to the wire, and for Italy, it did come down to the wire. That crash in the first corner by Carlquist may have made the difference, because Michele Rinaldi and his teammates were able to snag that final spot on the podium by 1 point. You can tell they're pretty happy about it, especially being in their home country. Michele Rinaldi being such a powerful figure in Italy, and a strong leader for his team, just like Dave Thorpe for England. But I gotta wonder what Thorpe was really thinking there. You know, he's going, well, I was the top European on the day, but they got beat by 125. That had to be a tough pill to swallow, but being the gentleman that Dave is, he took it well. And right there, they're looking over envelopes. You know, when you're young and you just put down a performance and somebody hands you an envelope, you kind of want to know what's going on in there. Look at all these people bothering Rick Johnson up there. He's trying to stand there politely and listen to an anthem, and these people just got to get their hands on him and bother him. Thorpe and his teammates still trying to figure out, is that a check? Does that look like enough to you? Johnny up on the podium for the 3rd time, finally dressed, wearing an appropriate shirt. The late Drew Lean of 100% made a shirt called Works Busters. We were all there on production bikes, one with a perfect score, so it seemed to fit. Now Johnny's turn to figure out how much money's in there. Rick just waiting for his name to be called out since he doesn't speak Italian. So that was it. I believe all three of us eclipsed even our own dreams with the performance we had that day in Maggiora, Italy. Roger DeCoster, a huge influence over our team all the years that we were over there, and especially the first year in 1981, just to convince the USA to even participate in the Motocross of Nations. When I look at this photo, I remember the ride Johnny put in, our last ride as teammates, and his last ride on a Honda. We all had great careers, but on this particular day, we were kings. But just like everything else, all good things come to an end. After this race, Johnny flew home to the United States, left Honda and signed with Suzuki, and was never able to regain the form that he carried through his Honda years. A couple years later, Rick Johnson broke his wrist, and that pretty much ended his career. For me, just when I thought it couldn't get any better, 1 week later, I married my wife Gina in Vermont. 3 months after that, I crashed, and my career was over. The reason for revisiting this event started as a project with One Industries to put out a Motocross of Nations inspired helmet. And I have to say that in reviewing all these photographs and all this video, it brought back emotions and feelings that I haven't had since that day. I want to thank my dad for filming this race, allowing us the opportunity to view it all these years later. And to One Industries for sharing my vision and seeing this project through. And finally to my brother Mitchell, who pulled these VHS tapes off the shelf, blew the dust off, and put a 21st century spin on it.